Pour yourself a fresh cup of awakening with Coffee with Wally, the podcast that brews enlightening discussions with a grind of the past and future. Join host and seasoned broadcast journalist Wally Wood of the Wood News Group and co-host Andy Valudes, the marine marketer and master strategist from Marketing Dynamics, as they explore the past, present, and future. Dive into a world where technology and globalization intersect with prophecy. Each week, Coffee with Wally links ancient and recent history to tomorrow, making sense of today's rapid changes through the lens of Revelation 13. Don't miss any episode. Visit coffeewithwally.com and subscribe for your weekly espresso of insight. Coffee with Wally, a fresh cup of awakening, awaits you. Coffee with Wally, where understanding our times becomes clear over caffeine.
All right, we're back. My name is Andy Valudes. I am your co-host of Coffee with Wally, here with your host, Wally Wood. Hey, Wally, how you doing today?
And good morning to you, sir. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. You know, you and I met up for coffee the other day at the Hyatt. You always like going to the Hyatt. Why do you go to the Hyatt?
Well, that's my honeymoon hotel, and that's our second home away from home. And we go back there every year for our anniversary. And so I'm well known around there, and so it kind of becomes my second office.
Yeah, I think you get your inspiration there. In fact, we're going to start dropping seeds on this. We're starting a series called Becoming a Hard Believer. At first, I didn't quite understand what you were trying to say. You've got a lot of topics that you've already recorded that we're going to reintroduce to help prepare our audiences for the future. But tell us a little bit more about the Becoming a Hard Believer.
Well, I won't take up too much of our guests' time today, but it gets back to the essence of your experiences with God on a practical level. God has been made so much into religion that that's where we box him in. And I'm here to say, no, he's not boxed in your church houses. He's in your heart. And he lives with you, walks with you, works with you, helps you every step of the way. He said in his word that the plans of a man are made in his heart, but I direct his every step. So that shows right there a very involved God. And so we take it more into the practical area. And what we try to bring in on these interviews are believers who have walked with God to some degree or another in a deep fashion in their current professions and their vocations. And they testify to how God really has come through for them and made them a success in their fields, as you call them, legends. So those are the type of people that we're honing in on. And I want to bring focus to our guest today on that. As we go into this.
Real quick, you got a different background. So is that kind of a hint as to our guest?
Yeah, it has to do with the space program. With the return of our astronauts from the moon today, or recently, the nation's focus is going back into the space program, and we're looking forward to the day of putting men back on the moon again. And so in light of that, of course, those of us who've lived through the entirety of the space program, we can't help but remember such things like the Columbia shuttle, its catastrophe, and the Challenger destruction shortly after launch. And I want to bring that into focus today, especially the Challenger, because there's always that risk. And even the astronauts themselves, when they came back this last time, spoke of the risks that they were aware of. I personally knew Gene Cernan, the last man to walk on the moon. And he was very forward about telling me that, look, when you're out there in space, you're far away from everything on Earth you've ever known. And you're in God's backyard. That's what he said. You're in God's backyard. And on the Apollo flight that they were on to go to the moon, Gene said we had numerous Bible readings, Bible studies, and prayer sessions on board. And he said, you just feel like God is more real when you're away from that which has been so much a part of your life than ever before. And he became more of a believing, walking, living Christian coming back from the moon than he ever was going up there. So I want to start today's program by revisiting that particular moment involving the Challenger. And I want you to listen to this and watch this. And then we'll be right back after we show this short video clip.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. We have no downlink. We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
Steve, I have one for you. After I, like everyone else, went back and reviewed this last night, and it appears that your calls, your commentary was running a little bit behind the events that I think is normal, and you continued the commentary even after the explosion began. What was your situation? Are you watching this on you're looking at data, or are you looking at a screen?
Well, we're looking at data, and directly in front of our position, there are two black and white monitors on which we have up displays which read out things like the percent of engines running at 104% or whatever that percent is. Another one that I usually read off the altitude and the velocity and the downrange distance. And usually the figure that is on the top of the screen that I'm normally using is inertial velocity, and that's probably why it doesn't match with the number that we gave as the velocity of the vehicle at the time of the event. There is a monitor off to the left, but I would liken that, I guess, to checking your rearview mirror while you're driving. You normally concentrate on what is in front of you, and periodically you look to the side or to your rearview mirror, as it would be, to verify what's going on there. And I think that I had gotten into a flow of calling the ascent, downrange numbers, that sort of thing, and it was probably 5 or so seconds before I glanced over at the screen and saw, what was remaining of the explosion.
The voice you just heard was known across circles as being the voice of the shuttle. And Steve Nesbitt was his name. He had several different titles. I knew him as the public information officer for the Johnson Space Center here in Houston. He retired from NASA about 15 years ago. When the Artemis II was splashing down, I reached out to him by phone and said, "Are you watching this?" And he indicated yes, he was. And he also said to me how much he missed being in that program, in the space program, since being retired 15 years ago. Steve Nesbitt, I want to welcome you to Coffee with Wally. We're going to talk to the former NASA voice and get some feedback from you on our going forward into space at this particular time. Welcome aboard, Steve.
Thank you, Wally. It's good to see you again after all these years, and good to be here with you and your audience. Yes.
I couldn't help but think about you when we saw the landing of the Artemis. And of course, last time you and we first got in touch with each other back in 2003, when I was starting the National Space and Technology Association. And I don't know if you remember this particular moment, but this urge was in me to start NSTA, and I didn't know if it was of God or not, and kept praying about it and wondering about it. Reached out to Gene Cernan. He said, go for it. So that's when we called NASA and wanted to get with you because you were the public information officer. And so you set up the meeting for us to join you down there. And my wife and I were on the way to NASA. And I prayed, I said, Lord, since you've chosen not to write in the sky, "Dear Wally, this is from me, love God." I need you to touch this man that we're going to go see and have him at some point ask, how can we help you? So we get down there, we meet with you in the conference room, and I think you had your secretary, you had another person with you. And so I was giving you my pitch, and you and your secretary are looking at a computer monitor. At one point you reached up and said, "Mr. Wood, I hear everything you're saying, and I thank you. And I just want to ask you, how can we help you?" Well, that was a God moment. And so I told you, I said, we need some open doors. We don't know anybody down here. And so you said, write down this phone number. And I wrote down the phone number, and you told me who it was. And I'm not going to reveal it here, but it was a pretty high-placed public official, federal official. And you told me, you said, "You think he can be of help?" I said, "Absolutely." Now, just for your information, Steve, I never called that number. I didn't want to bother the man, but you did help open doors, and we were able to move forward with the National Space and Technology Association for a period of 10 years. So you were always in my hip pocket, and you were always very helpful and faithful and resourceful. So anyway, how did you end up working at NASA, fella?
Well, back in the 70s, I was a newspaper reporter out in West Texas, out in San Angelo for the San Angelo Standard-Times, and had an opportunity to go to work at the university that's out there, got a master's degree in public administration. And about that time, 1978, there was a new program to bring people into the government who had just completed their master's degrees in public administration. So I joined NASA, but because of my background and my training in graduate school, I was in more of an administrative capacity. But I got bored with that very quickly because having been a newspaper reporter, that's a lot more exciting than doing budgets.
Yeah,
especially for the government. So there was an opportunity that came up about 1980 for me to transfer over to the public affairs office, which fit very well with my background. In that office, we worked with the news media from all around the world who were interested in covering NASA. And our reason for being there and having that office was to try and make it easier for people to come in and access all the NASA resources, talking to the people who are working and taking you behind the scenes, giving you the visual information, the imagery, the video, and all of that, and everything you could possibly need to make your job easier to cover NASA. So that was my start when I got back into the public information side of things in the news branch, and that's where I was doing that for quite a long time. And the best job that I had, I think, at NASA was just being a regular public affairs officer, a public information officer, because I got to go all around the center looking and talking to all the scientists and engineers as I set up interviews and contacts with media. So it was a wonderful way to get to see the inside workings of the space program. Later on when I got into management positions, I was back doing budgets and contracts and personnel management again later, and so it was not nearly as much fun. But
how boring.
Yeah, right. So for that brief, say 12 years, first 12 years there, it was a wonderful experience. Tragedies and difficulties aside,
right.
I always likened it to being at the top of a pyramid. Of course, the United States was the premier spacefaring nation. In Houston at NASA Johnson Space Center, we were the top center for human space flight. And, being there in mission control, doing that, it was just an incredible experience. And many times I sat myself down and said, how did someone like me, just little old me, come to be here in this very exciting human endeavor? A very inspiring thing. And I was just always grateful for the fact that I had that opportunity.
Yes. Now you went from being a journalist to being the go-to guy that all the journalists came to.
I think it was a real help to me to have, and of course I was actually born into a newspaper family. My parents actually had both worked at the Corpus Christi Caller-Times, and in the late 1940s, and that's where they met. And so from the time I was born, I was down at the newspaper office, wandering around as a little kid. And they used to let you run around amongst all of the hot lead type machines and everything in those days back in the 50s. So that gave me the background. Being a reporter gave me the background to help news media people to cover NASA.
You had the aroma of newsprint in your blood.
That's right. I that's something I still love today is, I spent a lot of my time in newsrooms listening to the clickety clack of the teletype machines and, smelling the ink and the paper, and, that gets in your blood. And about the closest thing I can come to today with that is to go hang out at a bookstore. But
yeah. It's not the same world anymore. Yeah. As you were watching the Artemis II mission, what were your thoughts having been? Now, how long were you at NASA before you retired?
33 years.
33 years.
Yeah.
That makes you part of the room work. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts at the time that you were watching this successful fly around the moon mission and bringing them back home safely?
Sure. Very pleased to see us getting back into missions that carry us beyond low Earth orbit.
Okay.
My entire career at NASA, we were basically confined as far as human spaceflight goes to near Earth orbit, 200, 250, 300 miles above the Earth. And with the Artemis missions going back to the moon, that feels more like real space exploration. And that was the thing that I'm just so pleased to see us go back. So hopeful that, of course, that we'll have successes. As time goes on, we do get better with our technology, and we are able to make space flight safer. There always will be the danger, of course, because it is a very difficult environment to work in. But
Yes.
I think you have to take risks when you go out. It's part of the part of the
Part of life.
adventure and part of life. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm just very glad to see it. I'm looking forward to the next couple of years where it's going to even step up. The pace will step up more. We'll be seeing astronauts next year rendezvousing with lunar landers in Earth orbit before going out to the moon again in 2028. And that is going to be, I think, a time when we will again feel the thrill of this, humans reaching out beyond Earth.
You mentioned something a moment ago that I really do want to hone in on, because the public doesn't know all the ins and outs of the dangers of space flight. And it was during the return of Artemis that we continued to hear the word risks brought up by the media covering the event, but nobody really fully understands beyond our age group what that risk is upon reentry. Can you explain to our audience what this bounce off or bounce back phenomena and risk is?
Yeah, sure. Well, with the type of spacecraft and the type of reentry that we use in the Artemis program, it's similar to the capsules in Apollo, Gemini, and even Mercury, but you're coming back into the Earth's atmosphere at a very high speed. When you're talking about missions returning from the moon, you're talking about 25,000 miles an hour coming into the Earth's atmosphere. And if you've ever, as a kid who tested out every dangerous thing I could, I was always trying something. But one of the things, trying to learn about things, you put your thumb over the end of a bicycle pump hose and you pump it down, and it gets very hot with that air coming out of there. Imagine coming in with a spacecraft at 25,000 miles an hour. When you begin hitting the Earth's atmosphere, the heat is very intense. So you have to have a heat shield. Now, we had some concerns about in the previous test, the heat shield on the Artemis 1 mission.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so they were concerned, and they modified the reentry profile, the angle at which the spacecraft comes into the atmosphere, to reduce the intensity of the heat, and that proved to be effective. Now, in future, we've got a different design on the heat shield that should work better and shouldn't be as prone to the hot spots that we saw on Artemis 1. As I understand it, Artemis 2, the change in the reentry profile proved effective, so we didn't have the kind of extra burning on the heat shield. So, but that risk is there, and it's you can imagine it's just a very dangerous environment.
And can you explain how critical the reentry angle is to the whole process?
Sure. If you come in at depending on the angle you come in, you get more heating on the atmosphere. So I'm not an engineer, and I don't know all the details of the entry profiles here, but all I know is that if you can modify the angle at which you come in, and the procedure that you come in for to reduce the heating on it. So, that's what they did on this time. And I think they'll be changing it again on Artemis 3 because we will have a different heat shield. So they won't be able to, or they won't find the need probably to adopt this different profile.
Now, in your capacity as the working journalist, PIO of NASA Manned Space Center, have you ever heard the hypothesis of bouncing off the atmosphere into space?
Sure. If you
given the critical angle that you have to come in at.
Right. I mean, the atmosphere, we think about it as, we look up, we see the clear sky, we think, well, that's nothing. But, if you've ever held your hand out the window of a fast moving car and you feel the pressure of the air on your hand, even at just 60 miles an hour, imagine coming in at far faster than that. It's like hitting a big cushion. And if you were to hit it at the wrong angle, you could deflect back out, and that would totally ruin your entry profile, and you could end up either in a bad orbit or bouncing entirely off of the atmosphere. So you just have to be you got to do it right, and luckily we've got some smart people who know how to do that.
Yes. And this is not to take away from that either. But back in the early days of the space program, when I first got involved, this was back in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of talk about bounce off and the fear of the speed in which a capsule not hitting the atmosphere just right, bouncing back into space, and the speed in which it would ricochet, if you will, and the complexities and the dangers of trying to retrieve the astronauts in such a case like that. Now, is this something that is of no longer concern to the modern day spacecraft, spaceflight, NASA?
I wouldn't say it's a non-existent concern, but we certainly have certainly learned a lot about the physics of space flight and reentry. We've had so many missions that have come back in through the atmosphere, and we've learned a lot about the type of materials that are necessary, the type of reentry profile, the angle that you have to come back in. That I think people feel pretty confident that that's not as much of an issue as it was back in the earlier days when we were still taking our baby steps and learning how to go to space.
Yeah. Well, that's something that, again, in light of this new generation coming into the realization of space reality, I've heard some talk, especially by the younger generation, of what's this bounce off? What's the risk of coming in? It's never explained in the media what that risk is, other than the heating of the heat shield, okay, and the danger there, and what the astronauts may be feeling inside, okay? But that's minimal by comparison to the greater physical risk of bouncing off the Earth atmosphere into space. And sitting there listening to all this, I couldn't help but reflect back on those early fears. And again, like you're suggesting, it has been so well taken care of in the world of physics that it's more of a minimal concern now than it used to be back in the days of Mercury, Apollo, and Gemini.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that is, of course, one of very many risks that exist in spaceflight. During the launch phase, you've got a tremendous amount of force that is taking this millions of pounds of hardware up into space. The dynamic forces acting on the spacecraft, they're very complex with all the vibrations, going through the very thickest part of the atmosphere. When you go up into what they call max Q, you're passing through the speed of sound, the vibrations, the pressure on it from the atmosphere, the speed building. That's a critical phase too. And you're also worried about the performance of the engines. These are high performance engines with turbo pumps and things that run at extremely high speed. So the bounce back factor is one, but there are many others. And as we saw with the Columbia entry in 2003, you can end up with some damage to the spacecraft that you don't know until you come back in. And then if your heat shield is compromised, you are in serious trouble.
Yes. Of course, again, us old minds on something like that, we go back to, what was it, Apollo 3? Houston, we have a problem.
Oh, Apollo 13. Yes.
Apollo 13.
1970. Yeah. That was quite miraculous that they were able to return safely from that mission.
Yeah. George Metcalf, it was across his console that call came forth. And George became an active part of our board for NSTA. After that, he was our first public speaker at our first public event for NSTA. And, but yeah, it was across his console that word came across. Houston, we have a problem. And yeah, it takes a special kind of pioneer, to say the least, to cross that threshold into this type of industry, this type of reality, for sure. Have you been curious to go down to the South Texas area for the other launch pad there and see?
Yeah, for the SpaceX things down there. I would love to do that. I might hop in the car someday and go down there. I'm fascinated. They have a much more direct approach to their research and development. Their philosophy is more of a willingness to tolerate failures on their unmanned spacecraft, and just gathering as much information as they can and pushing the limits every time. So they've made extremely rapid progress in developing their hardware.
And where is this located?
Yeah, it's I think it's Boca Chica somewhere. It's down in the very far southern tip on the coast of Texas down there. And,
Okay.
I'd love to go down there. It's, not too far from the Brownsville, McAllen kind of area down in there,
Right.
right on the coast.
Did you ever think that you'd live long enough to see spacecraft returning and landing at the launch pad?
That's been one of the most fascinating things to me. And, if you recall, they've had, they launched their, Falcon Heavy, which uses, the center, booster, but with two side boosters. And then seeing those two side boosters come and land together is just
Yes.
incredible. It just is astounding to see these two rockets coming back and hitting a precise spot, a landing pad right there on the coast from where they took off. And then
That's amazing.
if you've seen their Starship launches and the return of the boosters to their launch pad,
Yes.
I'm just extremely impressed by the abilities that these people show in developing their spacecraft and their support hardware.
No matter how long ago you retired, you can't get it out of your system.
That's absolutely true. And there are many times I really miss being out of the action, but there's a whole new generation of people doing it. They seem to be good at it, and I'm just pleased to be able to sit back and watch them do it. I have been over to the center many times. When I was the year I retired in December of 2010, it was before the final flight of the space shuttle program, STS-135, in the summer of 2011. So I went back as a volunteer and worked the basic answering the phones newsroom role. Just glad to be a part of it for that final flight, because I was there for the very first shuttle flight and I wanted to be there for the last.
Amen. Star Trek, here we come. Steve, I want to thank you so much. We're out of time now, and I do appreciate you, and I don't want you and I to become strangers anymore. We're going to have that cup of coffee, even if we have to fly there.
Yeah.
But Lord bless you, brother. And I do thank you so very much for your availability and your participation in today's program.
Well,
God
it's been
bless you, brother.
great to talk to you again, Wally, and so glad to see all of the things you've got going on. It's very impressive and inspiring to see all the things you're involved in. It's really good, and I wish you all the success.
Thank you, Steve. Take it, Andy.
You've been watching Coffee with Wally, where understanding our times becomes clear over caffeine. And now we're reaching out into space, Wally. This is incredible.
Amen.
Tune in to our next edition.
The Mystery. Heaven's Secret Story by Wally Wood. Before time, before creation, there was a mystery. What really happened before Genesis chapter 1? Scripture hints at a story rarely taught, yet essential to understanding everything. Respected journalist and author Wally Wood uncovers Heaven's Secret Story, revealing who we are, why we're here, and what was set in motion before the beginning. This is not speculation. This is revelation. Discover the mystery, Heaven's Secret Story. Available now. The truth awaits. Visit themystery.now.site.
Order your copy today, available on Amazon.